Hello and welcome to Heart Talk. I am Shahzeb Jillani. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Wajiha. Wajiha, how are you doing?
I'm well, how are you?
How has it been so far?
It's been great, and I'm kind of sad this is our last episode.
As far as folk tales are concerned, hopefully.
But more to come.
More to come. We'll have a discussion about that. But today's episode, the last episode, we are going to be talking about the legendary tale of Sassi, Punu, which is based in Sindh and Balochistan. Many of the episodes that we've done before, they are also mentioned in Shah-jo-Risaalo, which is the collection of poems and verses by Sindh's Sufi mystic poet Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai. And of the folk tales we have covered so far, arguably, Sassi Punu is closest to Shah Latif's heart. I say this because he has dedicated full 5 chapters or surs in his Shah-jo-Risaalo. It is a tale of an epic search for the beloved by Sassui. She's looking for Punu, whom she is in love with. She goes through a lot of trials and tribulations. It's a story of loss, endurance, and then finally arriving at your destination. How does this take place? We will tell you the story, and then Wajiha and I will, as usual, talk about what we each got out of it. So why don't we start? The story takes place in Bhambhore.
Takes place close to Bhambhore. So as you said, it's a Sindhi Balochi folktale. Some also say it took place around the 11th century during Raja Dilu Rai's rule in Sindh, a Hindu Raja. The story goes that this beautiful girl called Sassui, like you say Sassui, I call it Sassi, meaning moon face, is born to a Hindu Brahmin family. And, upon a girl being born, and like its customary tradition, the parents go to an astrologer, a Brahmin astrologer, to ask about her stars, her fate, the future. The astrologer does not have very good news. He says, she's very beautiful, but she will actually end up marrying a Muslim man. And they're Hindu, and so of course at that time, this could have been a manner of great shame and honor, because, of course, difference of religion, difference of caste. And so the parents, what they decide to do is, they decide to put Sassui in this wooden box and decide to, instead of killing her, which, used to be a tradition also, a horrible tradition of burying daughters alive or killing them, they decide to just abandon her, but they put her in this wooden box and across the river, Indus. Now the baby is floating in a wooden box and happens to come to reach the coastal town of Bhambhore. That's where a Muslim washerman, who we call Dhobi, happens to find her along the way, and he doesn't have a child, him and his wife, so they decide to adopt Sassui. And Bhambhore is this entry point for a lot of traders, and it's on the coastal area. So
it was called the city of Debel, and this is where Arab invaders entered Sindh.
Exactly. So Bhambhore, of course, is visited by a lot of traders, and Sassui, she grows up, everybody learns, knows about her beauty. So of course these traders also come and see her beauty and are amazed by her. So one day the news travels to this young prince called Punu, who's a Baloch prince. He's the son of the king of Kech in Balochistan, near the Makran coastal area.
Ari Jam.
Ari Jam. I'll say Ari Jam.
Ari Jam, yeah. Jam, sure.
That's just easier for me, no. He's the son of Ari Jam, and he is also heard, of Sassi's beauty, and he decides to go visit himself. Now, some also say he's a perfume trader. He trades in perfumes and masks. So he decides to visit Bhambhore, and that's where he has an encounter with Sassui. And they both actually look at each other and instantly just fall in love. And that's where the love story of Sassi Punu begins, because Punu is Baloch and Sassui is from Bhambhore, she's Sindhi. And her father says, I cannot let you marry a Baloch guy. And when Ari Jam finds out, he says, I cannot let you marry a Dhobi's daughter. But of course, Punu's, he's so besotted, he's saying, I'm going to just live with you. For that, he actually goes through what I call a Dhobi Test, which is conducted by Sassi's father. He fails that. So what is a Dhobi Test? Of course, we're familiar. There's a Dhobi Ghat here, how it, traditionally clothes are washed is they're put on stones and they're kind of hit with like sticks. And because Punu is a prince, he's unable to do that. So what he ends up doing is he tears up all the clothes.
He fails the test.
Fails the test, but he's rich. So he instead replaces it with gold coins. Compensates. Anyway, the villagers kind of convince Sassi's father, let him marry your daughter. And Punu says, I'll stay permanently in Bhambhore. Just let me be with your daughter. So that's where they both get married and decide to stay together.
So before they get married, as you said, Punu's family disapproves of the marriage because कहते हैं धोबी की बेटी से शादी करोगे बिल्कुल नहीं हो सकता. So his dad comes up with a plan, as they always do. He pretends to agree to the wedding and sends his sons कि आप शादी में जाएं, go on, attend the wedding. On the night of the wedding, there is a party, right? And they get Punu intoxicated, drunk, essentially. And they, जिस तरह हमारे बंदों को गायब करते हैं ना, उठा के ले जाते हैं.
बोरी बंद.
Yeah, so they basically abduct him and take him away. This happens while Sassui is sleeping. She's, probably dreaming of her big day the next day. When she wakes up and she finds out Punu is gone, she's obviously devastated, distraught. And she sets off on this journey to look for Punu alone. Her family tells her कि बाहर नहीं जाओ खतरा है, how are you going to do it? And she says, I have to do this. I have to find my beloved. So she's out there in this vast, lonely desert looking for her beloved. And during this journey, she comes across lots of obstacles, trials. She's talking to the sky, she's talking to the wind, the rocks, the desert shrubs. She's talking to a mountain. And during the course of this journey, she ends up finding herself, in the sense that she realizes that Punu is not out there, it is in here, within her. And towards the end of her journey, she comes up across a shepherd who, seeing a single beautiful woman alone in the desert, tries to molest her, and that's when she cries to the heavens to be saved. The earth shakes, the earth splits, and she jumps into it, and that way she's able to kind of save herself. When Punu comes to his senses and he finds out the story, he is devastated. He comes to that point and he says, let me be united with my beloved. And the earth splits and he also jumps in the open crack. So that's how they are united, not in their lifetime, but in the hereafter. As with most of these stories that we have.
And now their shrine is apparently in Lisbela?
Yes, it is at a short drive from Karachi. When you go on the Makran coastal highway towards Gwadar and Lisbela, it's on the way in the mountain of Pub.
Pub, yes. The hills of Pub is where she's also.
Yeah, not the British pub, but the town of Pub in Balochistan. So that's the gist of the story. I mean, obviously, as I said earlier, and as you were saying, Shah Latif has dedicated 5 surs to this. So there is a lot in there. And I would just like to ask you that, you've been reading and looking into this. The bit, which is the most dramatic bit, I suppose, in poetry, when she's searching for Punu in the desert. Exactly what happens?
That's actually my favorite part of this story. And, her going through the desert, she has blisters, it's scorching heat, there's this wind blowing, like you said, she has to cross the mountains. I was reminded of all these music videos and these visuals that I've seen growing up of Sassui going through a desert. And I'm sure people, now that I'm saying it, would also remember this, that there are lots of music videos where you see this girl, often wearing
traditional Rajasthani and
clothes, going through a desert. And I was suddenly reminded, and while reading this story, I was reminded of that visual metaphor and how, we see that. And that was actually Sassi's search that she goes through. And just reminded me of, how suffering and grief and trials is central, like, to this story for Sassi to eventually be able to find herself, find Punu in herself. In some ways, it's also kind of like the Hi Ranjha story. वो कहती है कि Ranjha Ranjha करती हूँ मैं आपे Ranjha हुई. So
there's a similar thread.
Says the same. She's looking for Punu, but she realizes Punu is within me. But you get to that stage after some serious struggle, some serious self-reflection, a lot of pain, and that is the fire, that the kind of the element of fire and the burning and the desert heat that I really kind of felt that Sassi was going through, right? This search, this longing, which is very different from perhaps the previous episode that we did with Soni.
Yeah.
Soni has to surrender. She has to submit. She has to immerse herself into the river of love, of leaving everything behind and taking a risk, taking the plunge. Here, Sassi is searching, but to search, she has to go through these tasks. She has to go through these troubles. And that's what eventually gets her to her final destination, which is to find herself.
So it's really interesting because when you think about Shah Latif himself, he spent many years traveling across Sindh and Rajasthan, through the deserts and mountains and rivers, observing nature. You think about the founder of Sikh religion, Guru Nanak. You think about Christ, Prophet Muhammad, Buddha. All these people who have such enormous influence for hundreds of years went on some kind of journey in solitude, whereupon they came across this wisdom.
In fact, Shah Latif's spiritual guide, in a way, Rumi was his spiritual guide. And, of course, people love to he's become a pop culture reference now also in some ways, which is obviously contrary to what Rumi really represents and how, his mystical and his Islamic poetry really is.
So here's a question that I'm grappling with. We talk about, pain and suffering and grief and loss. None of these are emotions we actively seek because we are brought up to stay happy and be happy all the time, which obviously is unrealistic because, ups and downs are part of life.
Because we aren't fully in control of our lives. There's tragedies happen in each of our lives. Personally, we've experienced them. And when they do happen, how do you deal with them?
That's how you channelize, I suppose.
And we're not taught to deal with the present and with what's going on in our lives, whether it's good or bad. So bad, you accept the bad, You don't build like an illusion that, oh, nahi, sab theek ho jayega, everything's fine, I don't have to worry about this. Even when bad happens, the only way to deal with it is to accept it. And when you accept it, you are able to overcome it, or you are able to really immerse yourself. And sometimes it's actually the really toughest parts in life that teach you something, right? Grief really teaches you.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point because in the story, there's a reference that when Punu is abducted, it's called the Night of Unconsciousness. Urdu mein khwab-e ghaflat, right? The Sufis like to refer to it, which is, what they're talking about is that Punu was intoxicated, he was not in his senses, and Sassui was fast asleep. And neither of them knew what is about to happen. The point that you were trying to make is, which you said some people might never, which means that if you're not alert to your thoughts and to your actions, you could, and maybe a lot of people do, sleepwalk
Through
your
life.
entire life, not know or appreciate any of this, right? Maybe that's fine too.
For example, I think, in the West, maybe there's an over-reliance, of course this is a generalization, on following the heart. तो वो Rumi पढ़ते हैं and they think, oh, Rumi is, they think that Rumi is talking about maybe romantic love. He's not. Rumi was a very religious, he was a, Muslim poet.
Based in Islamic tradition and
Of
thought.
course, and all his poetry is not just saying, follow your heart, which means just forget everything else, just do what you want to do. It's not hedonism, Here, it's the opposite in some ways, right? We're forced to follow tradition, what our parents are saying, what society is saying, in many ways be very practical. So there's even, in sometimes societies, an approach, but it's not like either approach is beneficial. It's balance, and the balance is, how do you balance the mind?
Harmony. Absolutely. Harmony is the key word. Okay. Yeah, so with that, I think we are approaching the end of not just this episode, but of this mini little series, our effort to learn and understand and explain this to each other.
And I just also maybe say that, I hope that people don't think of us as experts. That was not our intention.
I don't think anybody thinks of you as an expert. And we've made that very clear.
We've drawn from many different sources, and we're students, and we're
learning together.
That's been our attempt.
So before we end, you're going to sing us a song. And now this is one of my favorite songs in Sindhi, which I grew up listening to. And again, I have to admit how ignorant I was. I didn't really know the story. I just loved the song. When I heard, for example, Zarina Baloch or Sayyid Suleiman Shah, folk singers. Coke Studio has done its own version. And I would just love for you to sing and share the song. It's Perain Pawandi saan.
Perain Pawandi saan. And also I would just say that, thank you for getting me to do this, because, it's really, I love learning languages, and my Sindhi, I've been brushing up my Sindhi skills, my pronunciation skills, thanks to you.
Always a pleasure.
But this particular part is when Sassui is not wanting Punu to leave her side, or he is, she's saying, just stay the night with me in Bhambhore, don't leave. Yeah, okay, let me figure out. Perain Pawandi saan, chawandi saan. Perain Pawandi saan, chawandi saan. Rahi vanya raat Bhambhore mein Allah. Rahi vanya raat Bhambhore mein. Perain Pawandi saan, chawandi saan. Perain Pawandi saan, chawandi saan. Rahi vanya raat Bhambhore mein Allah. Rahi vanya raat Bhambhore mein. Uthte Ari Jam ja, ho Allah. Uthte Ari Jam ja, Ari Jam ja. Punal jam ja, Ari Jam ja, Punal jam ja. वाघू वठंदी सान चवंदी सान वाघू वठंदी सान चवंदी सान रही वञ रात भंभोर में अल्लाह रही वञ रात भंभोर में रोज़ो पाक रसूल जो हो अल्लाह रोज़ो पाक रसूल जो मियाँ मिठे रसूल जो सोने रसूल जो प्यारे रसूल जो सोने रसूल जो चाट चुमंदी सान चवंदी सान चाट चुमंदी सान चवंदी सान रही वञ रात भंभोर में अल्लाह रही वञ रात भंभोर में पेरें पवंदी सान चवंदी सान
Wow, 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 wow. Zabardast, zabardast. You could just sing here and I could just sit here and listen to you. But unfortunately, we have to end. Thank you. Thank you very much. Not just this one, but
thank you for
all the
being such a
songs.
lovely co-host.
I'm happy that we did this together. Yeah, with that, we are going to end and we'll say goodbye and thank you.